Hi, and welcome once again to the Sporting Memories part of Passion, Purpose and Grit. Normally, I would introduce my guest with some carefully chosen photographs from the internet, but this time I think you'll agree, and I hope he doesn't mind my saying, that he's more recognisable for his voice than for his looks.
Short for the corner came Verratti. Pirlo, lovely dummy. Marchisio through the crowd, into the net. Super strike by Claudio Marchisio. It has been coming. The Juventus man gives Italy the lead in Manaus. Sterling, good ball for Wayne Rooney. Sturridge is in the middle, good ball from Rooney. Good finish from Sturridge. England level instantly.
Well, pictures weren't very good. I don't quite know how I managed to transfer them as badly as that. But thanks so much, Guy Mowbray, for joining us. And yeah, can I just have a quick chat on that? People go, I know the voice. I can't place your face. Does that happen to you a lot?
It's the way most of us commentators like it.
Yes.
Yeah, rather be just in the background describing the action, being a nice accompaniment to what you're viewing, rather than getting in the way. And yeah, I'd much rather stay behind the scenes, and that way I can go in the pub unnoticed as well. It's the best way.
And most recently, we've heard you on the World Cup final. You've done so many World Cup finals now. We were just joking earlier about how that makes you a veteran, but I want to take you back to the beginning. How did commentary start for you? How did you get involved in commentary?
If we go right back to the beginning, I guess we're talking first instincts, I think. My late mum always used to say this to me. We grew up, our house overlooked a playing field at the back, which I was on all waking hours from dawn till dusk, and beyond dusk many times. Playing every sport going. And there was a cricket pitch on there. There was 3 football pitches on there, and my local village team played, and they were very successful actually. And they were right there. I was right behind the goal where my bedroom was. So when the weather was a bit inclement and I'd come in, I would watch their Saturday afternoon games from my bedroom window. And unbeknown to me, apparently, I used to do little commentaries on them. They played in black and white stripes. So I used to look at the numbers and I'd say, well, the number 7 there, he'll be Kevin Keegan then. I'd imagine it was Newcastle. And whoever the opposition were, the closest appropriation to their kit, and I'd make those names up. And I suppose when we were playing football out on that field ourselves, me and my friends would, as all kids do, I think you commentate as you did it. You know, ball comes in and you'd be somebody for that moment. So I suppose that's where it started. And when finally it was quite clear that the dream of actually playing sport professionally was not going to happen, then it was literally the next best option. It's all I've ever known. It's been mainly football, but definitely cricket as well, and other things along the way that have come and gone. And it's been my life. So it was always going to be something in a sporting sphere, and it's manifested itself in this way.
So cricket and football were your sports. Did you, like all of us, try everything? Or
I did. And actually, on that, you know, we're talking about sport broadcasting, I still mourn the loss of Grandstand, and World of Sport, which you know, growing up, I had a good knowledge of pretty much every sport going, and an interest in as well. And I think these days it's so, you steered down one path, and it's football or it's rugby or it's, and you don't tend to get the overview, which I do miss. I miss that massively.
Yeah, Grandstand was you know, part of our childhood, part of growing up and so on. But I also, growing up as a youngster, you listened to the commentaries, you watched the coverage and so on. And I would think that the numbers must be in the millions of youngsters and people who said that what you said, you know, I could do that. Was that ever a deterrent to you, that, or did you always felt you were going to be the one?
No, because it was never really something I properly considered for a career. It just didn't happen. You just didn't do that. So I never actually thought about it, to be honest. So listening to commentaries growing up, I can remember them, and I revere the voices now, but I didn't at the time. My heroes were the players. So I never really sort of thought, well, I want to be like them. I wanted to be like the players. You know, that was my thing. And I can actually remember I got reminded of this actually at one of these school reunions in a bar somewhere a good few years ago, and somebody I was at school with actually said, "Do you remember the German teacher telling you off and saying, I suggest you stop talking about football because you'll never make a living talking football all the time, and that's all you seem to do." So I'd like to meet her if she's still around, and maybe just get her thoughts now. But it wasn't a career. I never thought about it, and it was literally it was when I got to was I 20? Yeah, 20, and it was or maybe 19, and it was a line from my dad actually, who was he was a sports teacher, and he was a qualified FA coach and rugby coach as well. And he actually just said to me one day, "Look, what are you going to do?" And I had a job, and I didn't really enjoy it. It was an office job. I was taking a year out from university, which I'm still on. It must be the longest year out in history. And he just said, "Look, I think he saw the look in my eye, and he just said, 'Look, you are not going to get paid for playing football.' And he said, 'But with the contacts you have, why don't you try? You could do something about watching it.'" And it was sort of a light bulb moment.
Really?
And it was only then that I started to explore the possibility of, well, actually, I could try and do that.
So how do you get in? How does a youngster get in? I read it was club call with you, wasn't it?
That was the starting point, yeah. And it was just a series of, before emails, letters written, just handwritten letters, just almost pleading for an opportunity, sort of bigging up my career in quotes. I nearly made it as this, and I had trials there, and I know my stuff and all this, and then I got given a chance, and there's a story behind that actually. I still talk to people who want to do this now, and the biggest advice that I give them, especially in the early days, although it still applies, I think, to me now, is as far as you can, don't say no. If there's an opportunity, you have to take it no matter what. Because the first game that I covered was in October 1993. I say covered, I didn't actually do anything, I just went. And it was York City against Brentford in what would be League One now.
Yeah.
That was my team. See the shirt in the background from 2012. Yeah. That is my local team. And the season before, I was a supporter like everybody else, watching them get promoted via the playoffs. And that following season, months after I'd first written the letter, I got a phone call one Friday night, and it was a chap called John Temple, who you'll still hear reporting on Sky Sports and on BBC Sport and wherever else he provides updates on any game going. John's great, and he was the club call coordinator. For those of you too young to remember club call, pre-internet, that was every club had its own phone line service for a premium rate fee. You would ring up and you would get all the news from your club, and it was official news, it was club sanctioned, or you could listen to the commentary on a Saturday, and it was literally just down the phone, commentary done down the phone. Famously, Elton John used to ring up and listen to entire Watford games down the phone from Los Angeles, at a cost of goodness knows what.
Yeah.
So John rang me up one Friday night and said, "I've just rediscovered your letter. Sorry for the delay. Are you available tomorrow to come to York versus Brentford with me and shadow me with a view to doing some reports for us in the future?" And my response was, thank you for calling, but I'm afraid I can't. Maybe in the future. I've got tickets with some friends for Manchester City against Liverpool tomorrow, which I did have. There was 4 of us making a trip across to Main Road to watch a top level game of football, which we didn't do very often. So I put the phone down, didn't think anything more of it, walked back in, and it was my father again who said, "Who was that?" And I explained who it was, and he said, "You ring him back now and say you're going."
Yeah.
And I thankfully, it was before we had 1471 to find out which number had just rung you. Thankfully, he was in the telephone book.
Right.
Because I didn't think to take his number.
What a break.
So I rung him back and said, "Sorry about the misunderstanding. Of course, I'll see you there at 1:30 tomorrow, and I'll be there." And the following week after that, I was there covering a game on my own. And there was the starting point. And it's just an example of, even if you've got something else on, you drop everything. And I think I still do that now, if I'm honest. If it's in you and you want to do it, and football's in you, you will anyway.
Well, we're very grateful you dropped everything and were able to talk to us today. But do you remember that first commentary? Do you remember how you felt before you did it, how you felt during it and after?
You know what? I can't. I'm struggling to remember even who the opposition was. It wasn't commentary, so it was sort of reports every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Every 5 minutes, filing a report down the line. And I do remember my post-match interview quite vividly. and it was with Alan Little, who was the York City manager at the time. And I was lucky because I'd been around the club on and off as a kid.
Yeah.
I knew some of the figures involved, so it wasn't a dry, completely in awe introduction. I kind of knew him anyway.
Yeah.
But I do remember he had the patience of a saint with me, because my questions were, I mean, they were just inane. I vaguely remember saying something as stupid as, well, that was a game of two halves, wasn't it? You know, something, you know, and I had no training. I had no idea what I was doing. And again, you learn by your mistakes, and there were plenty of them. But for 2 years, I did that pretty much for, well, if it even covered it, for petrol money. And I covered games at York, at Hull. Very occasionally, I'd get the opportunity to go to Leeds United and do a full commentary. And that's where they started. And from there, the odd local radio station would say to me, we're not sending next week. Could you do some reports for us as well?
Right.
And there you get known, and you get a bit of a bigger audience. And from then on, as long as you're reliable and available and you say yes, you get on the circuit. And so that's how it started for me. There's no right way or wrong way of getting into it, is there? It's you find your own path.
Yeah, I mean,
and that was mine many years ago.
The training ground for most people is local radio. Did you cut your teeth there and work out the nuts and bolts of how radio works? Yeah,
that was my first full-time radio position, was at the local commercial station. I had done some work for the local BBC station, but then the local commercial station decided to start covering sport, and they made an approach, said, how would you like to be our sports editor? Which is a very grand title for a 22-year-old, as I was then. I was at 23, maybe, I was just about to turn 23 when I started. And because they knew I knew people in the area and I could get in touch with people and cover it, they basically gave me this sort of convoluted job of producing the sport programme and reporting on a Saturday, and sort of doing the sports news in the week for the breakfast show and the mid-morning show, Monday to Friday. They then acquired another station up in the northeast in Sunderland, which had exclusive rights to Sunderland commentary. And so I started doing that, and that's where the full commentary started. And I say it's like it's a mushroom that sprouts, and it was just through being heard that I got on. I've never worked as hard in my life to this day, I don't think, as those early days, and yet it didn't feel like work. It was just such a buzz. And when you're 23, you can anyway. You've got the energy of a gazelle, haven't you? So.
Yeah. And did you find it as easy as it now appears?
Oh, it's still not easy now. No, not at all.
No,
I don't know about that. It's funny. Finding it easy is a funny thing to sort of quantify, because I still don't find it easy. I still put my heart and soul and have to concentrate really hard, and the work day to day that goes on is never ending. It's like painting the fourth bridge, preparing for commentaries. You're doing four at once, and the minute one's done, it's gone, and you're on to the next batch of four. So I never find it easy. But the one thing I would say is it's something that kind of I don't think it's something you can learn. Unlike a lot of journalism and reporting, where you can learn the basic skills needed, this is kind of, you can either do it or you can't. And I still struggle to put a finger on why you can do it and why some can't. There's some very, very good reporters and journalists all around the country. You give them a microphone to commentate and they couldn't do it. Whereas you give me a pen and paper, I wouldn't be able to do that either. So
did you have role models? Do you say, that's the way I want to commentate, or did you just approach it and say, this is me talking about the game I love?
Only subconsciously, soaking up. I mean, we've clearly determined, I'm a sports nut, so I to this day I still devour everything, whether it be watching or listening, and it's kind of all I do. It's quite a shallow existence, really. So subconsciously I absorbed bits of everybody. I've never set out to try and imitate anybody, and hopefully I don't. But I've taken bits from everybody, I guess, over the years. I'm thinking now, obviously the grandees of when I was a child, John Motson, Barry Davies, Brian Moore, Peter Jones on the radio, Brian Butler. These are the voices of my childhood. So I absorbed them. Martin Tyler, Clive Tildesley. I've absorbed so much from every one of them, but nothing that I've set out to. It's just gone in. Even now, if I'm thinking about a bit of commentary in my head, or perhaps doing a voice check pre-match just to set their sound levels, I still don't hear it in my own voice. I hear it in one of theirs.
Really?
And it varies as to which day. Sometimes I'll hear it in Brian Moore's voice, sometimes I'll hear it in Clive Tilsley's voice, but it's never my own, never.
You talked about preparing and research, which, obviously is a huge part of commentating. And I love somebody once said to me, said, "What do you do the rest of the time?" And I said, well,
Yeah.
it's sort of a little bit of preparation and a bit of research, and you have to get some facts and statistics right. But presumably people say that to you all the time,
Oh, I still have, as I'm sure you had, Alastair, I still have some friends who think I read Shoot magazine and then go to work. And that's kind of my research. But no, it is non-stop, and it's not a hardship. It's a way of life. As I say, there's 4 or 5 games on at once where you're dotting the I's, crossing the T's, constantly just updating facts and figures, making sure you're up to date. Every game's different. People say, "Oh, you've covered them before this season, so that'll be easy for you." Well, no, because that was 4 weeks ago, and there's a lot changed since then, and they're playing somebody different. So there's a whole new scenario to put into play here with the research. So it never ends. We always do far too much, but it's better to have that. The old Boy Scouts motto, "Be prepared," is absolutely right. Better to have too much, and if it's a great game, if it's got everything that you want from the game, you won't use 95% of the stuff you prepared, and that's brilliant. There's no better feeling. Instead of trying to shoehorn it in, no, don't bother. Don't bother. Let the action speak for itself. If it's dull, you've maybe got a bit of a backstory that you can look down at your notes and you can use it. But when it's easy, when it's a great game, it's names, it's emotion, names, and reacting to what you see, and they're the best. They're the best ones.
Do you remember preparing for that first game? Do you have technique, or I remember turning cards over and trying to put names and numbers together and all that sort of thing. Did you have little techniques like that to try and
No,
no?
The first game, I don't remember what I did for it whatsoever. I'll have had it all written down. It was before I started printing things out, so it'll all been written down in pen and paper, and then I'll have got the team sheet and just sort of scribbled on that. But there wasn't a lot of prehistory or any sort of stats prepared. I was never big on that, and contrary to popular belief, I'm not big on it now. I'll have them to hand, but I'm not a massive fan of statistics per se, unless it's something I find particularly interesting or quirky. I'm not a big fan of just churning out numbers. So I don't really. Some will say, yes, you do it all the time. I try not to, believe me. And it's yeah, I don't remember how I used to prepare. I know there wasn't as much pre-internet, particularly. There wasn't as much. I'm remembering the '98 World Cup, the first World Cup I covered in France, and that was very much scribbling from game to game, pen and paper. Whereas now I've probably about 12 sheets for every match I'm covering,
Really?
All over the desk in front of me.
And pronunciations, do you have to? I mean, we used to have, at the BBC, we had a pronunciation department where people.
Yeah, it's not there anymore.
No, I don't know how to pronounce Imran Khan's name or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, far more than in rugby, although we do have some funny names. You must have some extraordinary names to get your head around pronouncing. Never mind, get you remembering who they are.
Yeah, it's a bit of a. Oh, how can I get into this without offending members of our fraternity? Because to me, it's up to the individual and how you speak yourself. I will sort of 2-3 times a season, the pronunciation police get out in full force. They're very keen to tell you you're saying it wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying it how I say it. I will always be as close to the native pronunciation of somebody's name as possible, but I will anglicize because I'm speaking English to a predominantly English-speaking audience.
Yeah.
An example I often use is, so if we have the sound in our language, I will use the sound, but if we don't have the sound, I won't. So, for example, the Spanish sort of th. We don't have that sound in English. To me, it sounds wrong to bring it out in an English sentence. The Dutch guttural h is nigh on impossible to say in an English sentence. So I won't do that either. I think you can trip yourself up unless you speak the language fluently, and also sound a bit daft. You're kind of throwing in a different language into an English sentence, and it's kind of a bit all over the place. So I'll try not to overpronounce, but I'll try to get it absolutely right. And the be all and end all is if you get the chance, ask the person themselves, ask the player themselves, and they will tell you. The hardest one we've got at the moment is one of the easiest names people would think, but it's the hardest one, and that's Kevin De Bruyne at Manchester City, of City in Belgium, because he will tell you himself. He pronounces his name. It's Kevin De Bruyne.
All right.
De Bruyne, and so some people hear that as De Bruyne, some people hear it as De Bruyne. He's actually said, well, actually, you can't say it in English. It's not possible with the English sound. So I say De Bruyne, other people say De Bruyne. Both are technically kind of right. Erling Haaland is another one. In Norwegian, and he actually said to me at the start of the season, in Norwegian it's Haaland, but in English Haaland, because we don't have that sound, and sounds a bit. If you say Haaland, you're not right either.
Yeah. So
it's something we think about. It's something I think we pay far too much attention to. The key part is making sure it's the right player. That's get the player right. Worry about how you say it as a secondary level.
Yes, I was going to go on to ask about the relative merits of identification, portraying the atmosphere, telling the story. How do they all balance when you're approaching or doing a commentary? It's
all as important as the other.
Really?
I think so. A little bit different on television. I'm obviously on radio, which I haven't done a lot of radio in recent years. I obviously grew up in that environment and love it dearly, actually, but I haven't done a lot for a while. That is obviously much more descriptive by definition. You are painting the picture for somebody who's not there and explaining what you're seeing for them, essentially. On television, it's more of an accompaniment, just adding a bit of what they can see, adding a bit of context to what they can see. The atmosphere, that generally takes care of itself. You can explain what something was if you hear it. Crowd chants are a bit of a minefield these days.
Yeah.
Sometimes best to pretend you don't know what they're saying. Otherwise, we'd be apologising every 5 minutes. A lot of the time, you can't tell anyway. But yeah, it's all as important as the other. And I think just being an accompaniment and a narrator to put a little bit of detail, put some meat on the bones of the pictures. The pictures still speak for themselves, and they're the most important thing. I have in the past, and I've been pulled up for saying this, but I still believe it to be fundamentally true. I believe a good commentator should be like a good referee. And I know what I'm about to say doesn't make sense in a way, but to me it does. And that is, you'd only notice them if they weren't there. You need them, but better to be in the background, just getting it right and accompanying it, and have it like that, rather than be a hindrance that's getting on your nerves, as you will know from both sides of the coin. A bad ref can completely ruin the game, and a bad commentator certainly can as well.
Yes, I mean, again, without naming any names or whatever, but you sometimes get the impression that some commentators have worked out the soundbite that might be used as a headline later on. So there's certain prepared phrases and prepared.
Maybe I don't know of anybody who does prepare things in advance. If they do, they do. I don't know of anybody who does that, because to me that's not commentary. That's I've thought about it in the past, and I thought, if this happened, just driving to the game, thinking, if this happens today, I might say this.
Yeah.
Once the game starts, that goes out of my head because I don't remember anyway. And if I did, I'm not an actor, so I wouldn't deliver it well. It would sound forced. It would sound contrived.
Yeah.
I can, hand on heart, I can say for myself, whatever comes out is what I've thought about at the time, what felt right. Well, I say what felt right at the time. It's just what comes out.
Yeah.
It must have felt right because that's how I felt at the time. And if it works for a soundbite, so be it. It's not something I would think about pre-game.
No.
I wonder if the style of commentators these days maybe just evolves towards that anyway, because of the way things are clipped up, because of social media and the small bits. That's what you hear. So maybe that's how you think a commentary should be.
Do you get nervous before you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Nearly every time still. And that's a good thing. It's a good nerves generally. If, I just before I'm about to start, whether it be a game that's being recorded to be edited down for highlights, or be it a game live to however many million, that initial bit, just as I'm about to start, as the teams come out of the tunnel, I will have the driest of mouths. and sometimes maybe 1 in 5. That 5 seconds before I start, I will be frantically sort of trying to swallow, just trying to get one more swallow in before we start. And that still happens, I'd say, pretty much every match. But I don't think that's a bad thing.
Regardless of the status of the match?
Oh, yeah. Just that first bit of getting going. It doesn't matter. I've often said, essentially we're talking to ourselves. That's what we do. It's a crazy occupation. We're talking to ourselves for a living. We can't see the audience.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter to me if it's a League Two game being streamed live and watched by 25 subscribers, or it's a World Cup final going to 25 million. It's exactly the same sort of feeling I get before it.
And do you always do your commentaries from the stadiums? Or
These days, not always. I work for many different organisations and broadcasters. So it all depends. In the past, yes, it would have been absolutely every time. When I first started in television and worked for Eurosport, we did a lot from the studio, off the telly, or off tube, as we call it. I did an awful lot, which is a good skill to learn, actually, because it's slightly different, the technique required.
Yeah.
You've got to be, by definition, a little more vague, because you're not seeing the full picture. You're only seeing exactly what people see at home. People ask us about off tube. We are seeing what you see. That's it. And we don't know what's coming. We don't hear the directors, and we don't know what's coming. So it is a slightly different technique. And I did a lot of that early on. Then it's going to the games always. For Match of the Day, we are always at every single game for the BBC. And it's all live. Everything is done live and edited afterwards, remotely from Salford. I have no input into that at all. I leave that to the skilled people, the VT editors, who can cut it down. I might say to them, I think there was a decent line, second replay after that second goal. Try and make sure that's in. I have to say, I can't remember the last time I did that. I just leave it to them. If it's a decent line, that's not for me to say. It's up for them to judge and put it in if it was worth it. So yeah, we're always live and always at the games. Occasionally, for some broadcasters, if it's a European game, Champions League, we might do it from the studio, and I'm guessing that is for reasons of cost these days. Cost and environmental reasons. Why be jetting away when you can do it from here? I was going to say perfectly well. It is different. You're not going to do it as well ever, because of the reasons I stated. Things that you see, the general feel as well. You don't get the feel of the game as well. You'll know from playing and commentating that some games take on a life of their own because of the atmosphere around and the feel. And if you're sitting in a darkened booth somewhere, you're not going to get that. So you can't add that flavour to the people back home, because essentially you're just back home yourself. So there is always something missing from an off-tube commentary. And
is that how you started your first World Cup? Was that from the commentary booth, or did you actually go to France for that? No,
funnily enough, no, because it was for Eurosport, who are a French-based broadcaster, and because the World Cup was in France, they were one of the host broadcasters. So pretty much, I can't remember how many games I covered at that tournament, but it was somewhere like 20, and I would say 18 of those were on site at the ground. So no, that was a wonderful experience. That it really was. Done on a budget. Sometimes don't say this to anybody. I hope they're not listening. You get used to the finer things, but sometimes the ones done with a bit of a tight budget, a bit more fun, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. So you travelled around following the games, and presumably some controller somewhere said, "Right, Guy, we need you to be in Lille today and in Nantes tomorrow and Marseille the day after."
Got the schedule before the tournament, and most broadcasters are pretty good. They sort out the travel for you. You just have to turn up at a certain time for a car or a train or whatever, and get on it, and you're sorted. But that was great. I did something like a game a day at that World Cup for the first 14 days, and it was brilliant. I was 26 years old, just having the time of my life, and working with these legends of broadcasting. That World Cup, I worked with the late Billy McNeill, the Celtic legend, who taught me so much. Just in that period of time, he taught me so much. Jerry Armstrong, World Cup royalty from Northern Ireland. Trevor Stephen, ex-England and Everton winger. Brian Robson. All these people, legend. Andries Bremer. That was one that got me. Was one of my claims to fame, which is not worth anything apart from to me, is I bought Andreas Bremer, the man who scored the winning penalty in the 1990 World Cup final. And I bought him his first ever pint of Guinness in an Irish bar in Paris. And he didn't like it, so I drank it anyway. But yeah, Andreas Bremer was with me having a drink. Ridiculous.
And I mean, I've covered World Cups as well, where you're on the road, as it were. Did you develop a sort of routine of, what you've got to do in order to be ready to do the next game, in order to get on the road to do the one after? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember it from then. I can't remember what it was then. But certainly the ones I've done for the BBC, you do have pretty much a set, a routine of. It's a game every other day because of travel reasons. Yeah. The exception being the one that's just been in Qatar, which you did a game and you went back to the same base every night because you could get there within an hour to every venue. So that was different. I didn't like it, I have to say. I didn't like that environment. It just didn't suit me. I enjoy, even though it's harder and it's a lot more stressful and there's a lot more can go wrong, I much prefer do a game, go back to your hotel room, pack up, get ready to get off early the next morning to go to an airport or a railway station. Off you go. The next day's travel whilst prepping, laptop in front of you, getting everything done and finished. Get there, go out for something to eat and a couple of drinks, do a game the next day, and the pattern repeats. Game, travel. For the first 2.5 weeks of any tournament, that's how it is. And that's how I really, really enjoy it. That's the best way.
Do you get the chance of seeing players in training, or do you not need to do that? Because you've been seen in match situations the whole time.
You could get the chance, but at these tournaments, generally it's only the first sort of 10 minutes of a training session that's open to the media anyway. And they will save all the tasty stuff when everybody's gone. So in all honesty, you're not going to learn anything spectacular from them. And at these major tournaments, there's such household names. The only reason you would go is probably to get a bit of identification in your head, find out what somebody looks like. You know anyway from the prep that you've done beforehand. So it wouldn't be something that I'd build into my routine now. But occasionally when we get the chance, day before a game, they're training at 5. Do you want to go? Oh, you know what? Yeah, we'll go and have a look to see if we can glean a little bit. And it does help occasionally.
So is it possible to have a typical working week during World Cup? We've just mentioned that, but during a season, During a season, do you have, this is what I do on a Monday, this is what I do on a Tuesday?
Yeah, depending on the month. So if it's a regular sort of quiet, non-European month, and there aren't many of those, generally I'll try and take the Monday off if possible. I say off, it's never off. You're always tinkering with a little bit. And then the rest of the week, I am pretty much, it's almost like 9 to 5, but I can obviously vary it and do when I want, what I want when I want, really. I'm completely my own boss. So I will be prepping, watching stuff, going back through footage, just trawling through all the information, looking at past results, looking at all the player history, and I'll be prepping games constantly, pretty much, Tuesday to Friday. Friday's the busy day when you start getting the phone calls about production and what's needed and what have you. And that's when you get it all finished. Friday night, I'll try and get out for a few beers. That's my usual prelude to the weekend, is go down to the local and just sort of get it all out of the system and then get ready for the weekend. Saturday will be a game somewhere. So drive to whatever, get the train to wherever, do the game, come home or stay over, depending on where it is. And then the Sunday will be the same. It'll be Saturday, Sunday, I would say 3 weekends out of 4. When you get to the Champions League and what have you, the last few years I've been working for various people, and I will generally have a Champions League game on a Tuesday and on a Wednesday, and Europa League Thursday, and also Premier League Saturday, Sunday. And that's when you don't stop. You're constantly doing it. You don't do anything else. This year was especially like that because the Champions League was condensed to get the weeks in before the World Cup started. I mean, as an example now, what have I got this weekend? I've only got one game this weekend, Everton against Arsenal. That's pretty much in the can. Friday will be my day of finishing off the little bits of info that come out from the managers' press conferences. And it's a big day with Sean Dyche taking charge of Everton for the first time as well. So there's a little bit of extra to do there. The following week, I've got 2 at the weekend. The following week after that, I've got 2 in the week, Champions League, Europa League, and then 2 at the weekend. So I'm actually already on those games. I spent the best part of this morning prepping Barcelona, Manchester United, Europa League playoff. So I'm already onto that. That's not happening until February the 16th, but I've pretty much got the template in place, just filling the bits as we go now as the games go on. I've probably got about 7 games on the go at any one point. So it never ends, but the beauty is you can pick your own hours. If I want to work in the night rather than the day, I can. You know, if I want to sort of, when the weather gets a bit better, if I want to get out and get some fresh air and get a game of golf in, I can do that, and then I'll do the work later, or vice versa. So it's a nice way to be, but there's a lot to do. The amount of work doesn't change. It's just where you fit it in.
Do you remember what a weekend is like?
Yeah, I had one not so long ago. I didn't like it. It felt wrong. In actual fact, if I have a weekend off in the football season, I would invariably go to a game. Be it York City, if they're at home, or even if they're away and it's within reasonable distance. Because sometimes it's nice to have a day not travelling. There's so much travelling that sometimes it's nice to just, you know what, I'm not going to go anywhere today. Where are York? Oh, they're away to, I don't know, Maidstone. I'm not going down there. Sorry, no, I'm going to have to give that a miss. But if they're at home, I'll generally go.
Really?
Got the odd Sunderland game just up the road. So I'll generally go to a game anyway if I'm up. It's very rare, and I don't like it actually. The odd Saturday that I've had off, I don't know. I sort of look at other people and say, "You do this? It's weird. It's weird not doing anything on a Saturday. I don't like it."
Yes, I remember the same thing. You know, I couldn't remember a weekend because I played.
And in the summer, I'm still for my sins, although I'm wrestling with it again as I have done for the last 3 years. I still play reasonable standard of club cricket, so I've decided I'm going to go again this year for the 5 or 6 games I can get in. I should pack in really, but
what are you, a pace bowler or a batsman or what?
I'm a bowler, but it's getting slower every year. It's getting more predictable every year. The batting's getting better actually, so maybe that's my future. I don't know. But I'm the oldest one in the team now, and I'm feeling it. I'm starting to feel it for the first time. So I keep saying this is the year I pack in, but I can't. I can never do it.
Yeah, and a life in sport presumably makes it more challenging to have a social life and a family life.
But it is the social life, to be honest. It is. It's all part and parcel of it. And the family life, it's all, again, it all links in. I've got a very supportive wife and daughter who come along with me to as much as they possibly can as well, and enjoy it too. And what they're not, I wouldn't say they're enormous sports fans, but they certainly enjoy going to a live game, be that cricket or football. They'll always enjoy going. So we make the most of it. And so sometimes if I've got a game at West Ham on the Saturday and Arsenal on the Sunday, I might say, well, come down with me. We'll have a weekend in London, and you come down with me. We'll sort it out. Which means I've worked the weekend for nothing, but there we are. That's how it goes.
Yeah. But I mean, do you get to see the world? As people say, often say, oh, you've been to so-and-so and so-and-so. But if you were, presumably, you don't really see much of the places you're commentating.
Define the world. I see a lot of airports and stadiums, and that's the world to me. So, I see a lot of that world. I'll tell you an example of that. I mean, we were in Brazil for the Confederations Cup, which is no longer, doesn't exist anymore, which is always sort of the warm-up for the World Cup the following year. And we were there 2013, for 3 weeks, I think it was. And then back again 2014 for the World Cup itself in Brazil. So I had 2 trips to Brazil, 2 summers running. And my producer, Matt, he's got kind of the same attitude as me, as we're here to work. If we're going to visit these places, we'll bring the family. It feels wrong to visit them without the family here. We're here to do something else. So we're having a look at one of the 7 wonders of the world, the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio. And I said, we've got to go up before we go. And he said, well, we're back next year. We'll do it next year. So in 2014, we set it in stone. The last week of the tournament, we've got a semi-final and a final in Rio. So we're not travelling for that last week. So there must be a day that last week where we can fit it in the morning and go up there. And we thought about it. And I think you had to get up at 5 o'clock to make sure you got there before the crowds and get the cable car and what have you. And anyway, he wasn't having it at all. And I was a little bit upset. I thought, well, all this way, and we've done it again and not gone and visited one of the wonders of the world. And he said, anyway, I'll meet you for a beer at midday. And this was sort of the day before the World Cup final, which is bizarrely the easiest game you'll ever prep for, because you've done it all. You've seen both teams and you've got all the notes. It feels as if you should be doing more, and you can't because it's all done. But so I met him for a beer at lunchtime that day, and he sat there and he went, look at that. I went, what? He went, there's the statue up there, look. I went, well, yeah, that's what we should have done. He went, we were up there, we couldn't see it, could we? Well, we are. We've got a view of one of the wonders of the world right here, and we've got a drink. What's the problem? And I thought, you know what? There's logic in that. Why didn't have to be stood next to it, did we? So no, the short answer is we don't see much of the world. We see a lot of stadiums, railway stations, airports.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So you don't really get a sense of the countries that you're in.
You do by travelling around.
Yeah, you must imbibe some of the news articles.
Yeah. Well, different cities. You're bound to, just by walking around, just by being on the bus or in a taxi or whatever, or we go out to eat obviously as well. So when you're there, you do obviously, get a feel, and you know where you are, and you get a feel of that city. Absolutely. So you do get that without being a tourist. But this is another reason why I didn't really enjoy Qatar itself as much, because we just didn't have that. We were in one city, and that was it. So it wasn't nothing wrong with Doha at all, by the way, in terms of how they presented itself to the world. Well, don't want to go deep into the political ideas of it, but nothing wrong with it as a venue to be in. Yeah. But I enjoy the traveling. I enjoy the sort of seeing, because as you'll know yourself, different places. Russia is a great example. In 2018 at the World Cup, and South Africa and Brazil, all these ones that have gone before, vast distances were involved. And when you cover those vast distances, you realise there are countries within countries. Yeah. The eastern part of Russia was completely different to Moscow. The north and the Amazon part of Brazil was completely different to Rio. So I enjoy that. I do enjoy seeing different flavours.
And this particular World Cup, Qatar, we don't want to go too deep into the political implications of it, but there was more of a fuss about it before you went there. Did you sense that as a man having to go out to work there? Yeah,
and it shouldn't have been there. It was wrong to have the tournament there. I will stand by that. It shouldn't have happened. But it did happen. And then it's not much of a dilemma, to be honest, because it's my job. My job is covering football, and that's what I was there to do. And if I didn't do it, somebody else would have done it in a heartbeat. So you're not exactly making a great stand. Nobody's going to miss me if I don't go. It's not exactly going to change the world. But I think certainly at the BBC, I think we did our best as a production team to make it clear some of the pitfalls and some of the reasons why people were unhappy. My job is the easy bit, as I say. I can, in quotes, stick to the football. So that's what I did. But I didn't like it being in one venue anyway. You kind of, I don't even feel, even though I was there for over a month, I don't feel I've seen Doha either, because it doesn't look like that normally. Everywhere you went, because it was so condensed and there were 8 stadiums in such a small area, all I can picture is great big FIFA emblems everywhere in bright, lurid lettering. Very, very commercial everywhere. Whereas when it's spread over an entire country, or in Russia's case, practically an entire continent, you do see other things other than FIFA branding everywhere. It's spread out. Whereas this was so condensed. To me, Doha might as well have been FIFA City.
Really?
That's what it looked like.
Yeah, and for us watching, you probably didn't see it, but we also saw FIFA's president every time we watched it.
I certainly noticed him, absolutely. It died down a bit towards the end. I think they got wind of the fact that some of us were poking a bit of fun at him, especially his brand new trainers every match. They were a sight to behold. Did
you feel every time his picture flashed up that you had to commentate on it, or did you feel that's one of these things we just move on?
I've not watched any of it back, but I think I got to the stage about 5 games in and just saying, he's here again.
Yeah.
Always gets a ticket, that fella. Something like that, because there was no point, there was nothing more to add, really. We knew he would be there. What was the point of showing him?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever listen to yourself back?
Not much. Not much. I do sometimes. Not a great deal. Just to make sure it was all right. A 10-minute match a day edit, I will listen back to. And that's kind of more from a production point of view, to make sure it was all in there, to make sure they didn't splice. Sometimes when they chop a sentence for editing purposes, they sort of leave it hanging. I think it was quite clear. I was halfway through a sentence there. It sounds wrong. You've chopped me off. You should have let that go. So it's just to be picky sometimes. And I do have a rule actually, which works the entire time with Match of the Day. Is I would say 1 in 10 commentaries I will drive home from, and I'll be thinking that was really good today. I'm very happy with my work. 9 out of 10, I'll be driving back thinking, I should have said that. Why didn't I say that? Why did I get that wrong? Why did I misidentify him? I'll only remember the things that were wrong. The perfect commentary's never happened. It won't happen from me, but I'll keep trying for it. The irony is, those 9 out of 10 that I'll be driving home beating myself up, I'll then watch it and it'll go, oh, it was all right, actually. That was good. The 1 out of 10 that I'm happy with, I'll watch back and it'll be terrible. and it works all the time with that.
So you set your own standards, your own.
Oh, yeah. Nobody ever needs to tell you if you've got something wrong, because you will know way before anybody else. And most of the time they won't notice anyway, but you will know, and it will eat you up. Well, certainly in my case, it will eat you up.
Yeah.
If not forever, certainly until the next commentary. Certainly will. Do
you practice your voice, or is it just come naturally?
No, I don't look after it nearly as much as I should. I keep getting told honey, lemon, ginger, etc. I should drink a lot more water. I should do a lot more on the honey and lemon side. Maybe one day I'll have to, but touch wood, it's all right for now.
And looking at these World Cups, the last World Cup, England did pretty well. And so, do you ever have a chance to be patriotic?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when a game starts, it is one team against another, and it is. It just happens that way automatically. Even if I might be thinking deep down somewhere, oh, I'd love it if they won today. Once the game starts, I don't think it. It is one team against another, and the same is true with international matches. You know, I'm sure plenty of Scots would disagree and say you're really biased towards England. Bias is always in the ear of the person who's alleging it. It's certainly not coming from me, and it's certainly not coming from any of my contemporaries. But England's a little bit different, because I'm mindful that a lot of the audience is of that mindset, and I don't think there's anything wrong in that, be it rugby or cricket or whatever. I just think when it's the national team, and incidentally, I would be exactly the same for a Scotland game, for an Ireland game, for a Wales game. I'd be exactly the same. I'm very much an advocate of the home nations. I'm mindful that most people will want them to win. So maybe it comes out a little bit differently. That said, if they're stinking the place out, or if they're diving or give away a blatant penalty, then it's fair game to say that. You're not going to disagree, oh, referee, that was terrible just because it's England. No, absolutely not. But you can make clear by your tone that, you know what, this would rather suit you if England won today. Right.
Yeah. But also the guys working alongside you, the co-commentators and so on, they're not necessarily of the same mindset or training, understanding of you, and they can be blatantly nationalistic, can't they?
I think so, because they've played. They've 9 times out of 10 when I'm doing an England commentary, I've got an England international sitting next to me. So they are perfectly, as far as I'm concerned. And it does grate with some people. I know certainly on club games it grates with some people. It doesn't bother me particularly. You know, for example, if it's a Newcastle game and I'm with Alan Shearer and he says we, for goodness sake, he's perfectly entitled to say we for Newcastle United. It doesn't mean he's going to be blatantly biased, but quite obviously he's going to be partial to Newcastle winning the game. And the same goes for England. I think they can. And actually, I quite like a co-commentator who's a little bit, not fully, but a little bit ill-disciplined, because I think it brings a naturalness and a sort of a proper excitement to it. I don't mind that at all.
And England's success, relative success in this last tournament, has that been good for you and good for the game?
It's kind of irrelevant whether it's good for me or not. It's certainly good for the game in this country. Absolutely is. You know, I think we can all realistically say now that not many of us of whatever age could have said 10, 12 years ago, realistically, we will see England win a World Cup, win a Euros. Well, I think we will now in our lifetimes. I genuinely think we will. We're on the right track. We've caught up, if you like. Should never have been the case of having to. but we have. I think we've got the right man. That's again, it's a judgment call. Many disagree. I think absolutely the right person for England, and I'm delighted he's continuing, Gareth Southgate, and the team that he's got around him. I think it's a joy to go and watch England at a major tournament now, whereas in the past you used to go and watch through your fingers a little bit. And the same goes a lot as well for the supporters going to watch them, because sometimes you'd go and you'd still be I am still a little bit wary about what might happen in Germany next summer at the Euros. I think it's so accessible and easy for everybody to get to. The idiots of the world could gather, which is a slight worry. But generally, the last few tournaments, it's been a joy to cover England, because those that have gone to watch for the right reasons and just enjoyed themselves and got behind the team. And that's been great. It's been really good. It is a joy. It didn't used to be, and it is now. And
the sport of football seems to have made great strides as well as a sport and as a spectator. I can remember watching, maybe it's the conditions, the pitches, watching football on big muddy grounds and so on, and it was hard to see how anybody had the skill that they have now. It has, but I'm sure, as you will do with rugby and cricket as well, I've got mixed feelings about it, because I do still love the rubbish pitches, the awful facilities. I know that's something of my age, but I do. I'll mention my team here, York City. We've got a brand new stadium now, second season in it. The facilities are magnificent. They're spotless. They're brand new. It's all seater. You can get something to eat. I loved our old ground, which has sadly been demolished now, Bootham Crescent. I loved the quite frankly rotten urinals at the back of the David Longhurst stand. I loved them. There's something evocative about the tradition, the smell, the weeds growing, and then the dodgy burger, the boiled burger from the stall in the corner, the pie that basically had a filling that was lava, as far as I was concerned. It didn't have any taste, but my God, it was hot. I like that, and I did something last year where I took my daughter, who's now 16, so she was 15 then, or was she 14? No, she was 14 then, and I had a Sunday off the following week, and I had a Saturday off. It was an international weekend, so no Premier League. So I said, right. She wanted to go to a game, so I managed to arrange tickets the following weekend for Manchester City against Everton. The previous weekend, I said, I will take you there if you will come to watch York with me at Curzon Ashton, on the edge of Manchester, Ashton under Lyme. So we went to Curzon, and it was 0-0. It was rotten. It rained. It was cold. We had the aforementioned dodgy boiled burger. Yeah. A warm can of beer for me, and a flat bottle of pop for her. And then went, and I was very fortunate. I got tickets in the proper hospitality at Manchester City the following week. And I said to my wife that night, I went, wait for this. I said, you wait for the answer. It'll surprise you. I'm going to ask her which she enjoyed most. Yeah. And I was fully confident she'd say, I preferred the day watching York with you, Dad. She didn't. She liked the 3-course meal and the hospitality and the posh seats in Manchester City. But so she will forever be a disappointment for that reason. She got it wrong. But she will still come to these grounds with me when I ask her. So that's maybe an underlying sign. And I do. That was still the best day I had last year. I really enjoyed just going, paying my 12 quid to get in. And Curzon was a bargain. I think it might be 15 maybe. But watching a terrible game of football. Our manager got sacked that night. And it was rotten, but I loved everything about it. The laugh we had, and that's proper football. So for all that football makes strides, and it's right to, and it brings more people in, and I get all that. But I still prefer the 80s mud, the 80s, I think I can say this, the edge that was in the air. I know that's not for everybody. I know it's horrible, really. We shouldn't encourage it, but I like that sort of, we're going to something here. And I still enjoyed that, and I still look back, and we have now, don't we? Have the Big Match Revisited is on ITV4. You can find that. That's on most weekends. During lockdown, I did a series for the BBC that was World Cup Rewind or FA Cup Rewind, which involved looking at a lot of archive stuff. And I loved doing that. I loved looking back at the old stuff. To me, it will always be better. My heroes play on mud pitches, not the carpets of today. Well, that's the fascinating thing that actually links us together in terms of sporting memories, which is a charity I know you They're dedicated to help people whose lives are affected by dementia and depression and social isolation. We've got a flourishing group here in Brighton, and the memories that come out from people, the memories, and most of them are to do with harder times. Do you remember that time when we struggled and we couldn't, the train was late and we couldn't do it? And all our best memories are built around difficulties, aren't they?
And that's the beauty of sporting memories, because one photograph can conjure up a conversation that can last hours, maybe days. It could even go on for weeks. I was talking about this in my local with somebody the other week, and we were talking about, it was the anniversary actually this week of York beating Arsenal in the FA Cup 1-0 in 1986. Might have been 85. We played Arsenal and then played Liverpool. We played Liverpool 2 years running in the 5th round, and I went to all those games. And my fondest memory, we started talking about Arsenal, and I was went, do you remember queuing up for tickets?
Yeah.
And I can remember the excitement of 2 weeks before the game, going at sort of 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning with a friend and his dad. And we queued up right around the corner, down the street, round the back of the barracks that were there outside the ground, all night in the dark and the cold in January, just to be there at 9:30 when the ticket office opened and get our tickets. And that to me that's still as fond and as strong a memory as the game itself. In fact, it's probably a stronger memory than the game. And it's all of that is wonderful stuff. I still love looking back at everything.
One of our groups, we had a guy who saw Don Bradman's last game.
Oh wow!
At the Oval, and he described it. I mean, he must have been 12 or 13 at the time. But he remembered, it was his birthday, his dad had taken him as a special treat, and he remembered everything from the ticket to the gate and to the standing ovation they gave Don Bradman and the dismissal. And it was just like listening to him.
Yeah,
that's
wonderful. Actually, funnily enough, just to take it onto cricket for a moment, I went to watch Yorkshire at Scarborough last summer. On one particular day, and I was delighted to find that actually of all the venues, that hasn't changed in 50 years. It's exactly the same, and I loved it all the more for it.
And memory is what we're made of in the end. My dad had dementia, and the only way we could get through to him in the end was to bring him back and say, do you remember that time when you did this? He was an athlete, and he had a lot of great memories from that, and you could set him off on a story, and it gave him the confidence to keep talking. It gave him the knowledge maybe to know that he had something to say. Yeah,
absolutely. And we're all the same in that respect, no matter how young or old you are, or what level of mental capacity you have these days. I think we're all the same in that we probably can't remember what we did yesterday or what we had for tea, but you'll certainly remember a sporting event you were at 3 years ago, 10 years ago, 40 years ago. You'll remember that. And that's the beauty of it. And that's why I will always absolutely love the job I do and always cherish it. I'll never take it for granted. No matter what stadium I'm at, I'll never take it for granted. You go there, every time you go, something could happen that will stay in your memory forever.
Yeah. What stays at the moment? What's your favourite commentary? You got one, or
the next one? The next one. I know it's a rubbish answer. I know
no, it's the right answer. It's the right answer, I think, because
it's the next one. Because as I mentioned earlier, the perfect commentary has never been achieved, and it still won't have been achieved when I pack in. But I'll keep trying for it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get to 20 minutes and think, you know what, I'm all right so far. And the minute that thought crosses my mind, game over. Something will happen.
Yeah.
No, the next one will be the best one. And as regards games, as people ask me, what's the best game you've ever seen? What's the best game you've ever commentated on? I think I have a definitive answer for now, but it will change in future. And I think the World Cup final we saw in December will be right up there. That will be it. But it's probably only because it was the most recent big event that was really good. But they'll take some beating, I think, that one. I think that will take a heck of a lot of beating.
Yeah, sensational. And made, I will say it by your commentary. It was
Thank you. They're easy ones to do, though. They are the easy ones. The best commentaries, and here's something for all of those who give out the awards at the end of a year. The best commentaries are not your World Cup finals and your 4-3s and 5-4s, because they take care of themselves. Your best are the turgid 0-0s in mid-January when it's freezing cold and there's nothing to interest anybody. but somehow you've kept it alive, made it interesting for the viewer, made it interesting for yourself. They are the best commentaries, and that's when the skill really gets brought to life. The other one's just shouting names.
Brilliant stuff, Guy. And I'm looking at the clock, and it says that you have brought this hour to life, and it's been incredibly insightful as well as anything else. And it's been a great pleasure for us to have you as our guest today, and to congratulate you on all you've achieved in World Cup so far. And as you say, look forward to the next one. Guy Mowbray, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks very much.